I think so.
We shouldn't do that. We should come here and find out.
Okay, everyone,
who's
I'm
already
just going to
doing
start the
it.
second half, if I may. So, welcome to the second half of tonight's meetup, Titanium User Group. Like I introduced myself, it's been around since last October. I'm the founder of Movable Ads. I actually have an office here in the Tech Ranch. And you can find more information about Meetup at meetup.com, Titanium User Group Austin. And as always, special thanks to our sponsor, Tech Ranch Austin, because they allowed us to meet here at no cost. And also Accelerator for providing the food and the swag. So today's agenda is going to be a little bit of a touching base with the Alloy framework, which is the MVC model, and some sample code using Alloy, and also some developer resources based on tonight's agenda. So typical application structure. I've actually used this slide very often, but I think it's really necessary because we have newcomers all the time. So with a mobile app, you're always going to have a window, which is the foundation, which is like the base of any app. And what I mean by foundation is building an app is like building Lego. It starts with the base of a window, and top of that you add elements such as like a photo, which is a type of view, or a button, or switchers, or scroll views. These are all views. So with the foundation of a window, you have elements called views on top of it to construct your app. And for those who have a web developer background, a window could be equivalent to a page, like a web page, a single page. And the view will be equivalent to a div. Now, Titanium uses a tool in IDE called Titanium Studios to build mobile apps. And Titanium Studio is built on top of Eclipse, so it has a very similar setting as Eclipse or Aptena, anything that has menu settings like those IDEs. So if you're familiar with those IDEs, it's a very easy way to just walk through. And when you start a new project with Titanium, you're given two different choices. The first is a classic, the second is Alloy, which I referred to at the beginning, which is the name of the MVC framework in Titanium. Now classic is when you build mobile apps using Titanium, using JavaScript, using just JavaScript files. So it's not structured in an MVC format. So you can create an entire app using just one JavaScript file, like app.js, or maybe a separate series of files where you can just include or require them. But then again, if you want to structure your app in an MVC format, where you want to reduce your line of codes, you use what Accelerator calls Alloy. Just to go briefly over what MVC is, I'm sure there's a lot of folks here who know way more than I do, but MVC stands for Model View Controller, and what this is, it's a type of pattern in software. So when you create a software, a mobile app in this case, you actually separate your code based on the function, the features, or the usability. The three interconnected elements are models, views, and controllers, and they all have different objectives. A model is the business logic, or to simply understand, maybe just the database part of it. The view is what the user sees, the interface. The controller is what connects the models to the views. Now with Titanium Alloy framework, a very simple way to understand this is the model is the file that has the XML. The view is the TSS. The controller is the JavaScript file. Now, XML is pretty common. So what the heck is TSS? It's the same thing as CSS, but it's a different name that Titanium has to create the view in. And the controller is where you define all your functions. Now to simply put it, the model will have all your constructors for your app that defines the name of a class for a specific part of the view. The view is a list of CSS files. The is called differently in TSS. The controller is where you put your method, your functions, your JavaScript functions. So let's say we created a very simple app where we have one window with a photo image view, and when you click on it, we have an alert. To construct that, the XML will define all the models, which is the window, which contains the entire app page, and the image view, which defines where we place the photo image file, and the JavaScript file will have the event, which is the behavior. Once there's a click event, we do the alert. And before we go to live coding, so why do we use Alloy or MVC for that matter? Well, if you prefer to structure your app in an MVC model or a pattern, this is what we use in Titanium. Now, it is up to every developer whether or not to use Alloy or not, because I personally don't use Alloy all the time, and there are several reasons for my part. I will share a little bit more of that. And using Alloy is a better way to maintain your code because it is structured in an MVC format. It actually reduces your code. And also, the best part of Titanium is you're able to maintain your code across multi-platforms like iOS and Android with one code base. And if you structure your app in MVC format, you can start your app with, let's say, developer A, and you move on with hiring somebody else or outsource it to an offshore company, as an example. And if they understand the MVC framework, I honestly think that it's better to construct your app in an MVC format, because then it's easier to understand right off the bat, because you don't have to actually go through all your entire app to understand how the app is constructed. Now, like I said before, I don't always use Alloy, and that's because Titanium, one of the best part about using Titanium is they have something called custom modules. Now, using Titanium, you're able to build and export native apps, Android and iOS, and alongside of that, you can actually build custom modules on your own, or you can actually download them or even buy them. Now, not all custom modules support Alloy or MVC framework. That's the only reason why I tend to, I guess, be judgmental sometimes, whether or not when I'm using Alloy or not.
Hey Jay.
Yes.
Is there any place that we could go to see what there is as far as the custom apps in Alloy versus native, or you know what I'm saying, to better illustrate that?
I'm not sure if there's like a one place where there's like an article, but
yeah, I didn't know if anybody had
but then
published
again, if
anything.
you are open to being scrappy and do some research, there is GitHub, which is the obvious. There is a site called marketplace.appcelerator.com. It's where you download or you purchase, or you can even upload your own custom modules or templates, or even fully constructed apps. And there, they actually have an indicator whether that app or module or template supports Alloy or not.
Okay.
You say that's the only reason you don't use MVC is if there's a conflict with a custom module that you want to use.
That's probably my personal reason, and that's the main reason also why I tend to sway away from Alloy.
Otherwise,
What are some examples of those custom type modules?
Yes, very simple example. Let's say you want to create an app, a photo app, using Flickr's API, the REST API, which is for websites. And if you were to create a native app using Objective-C, there isn't any custom modules just for Objective-C if you don't create it. Now, even with Titanium, you can easily construct your own custom module, or actually there is already a custom module you can actually download. And the reason I use that as an example, there are a lot of APIs or web services that you might want to implement to your mobile app. You can actually create a native custom module for your mobile app, even with an existing web REST API service. So you can actually play around a lot using Titanium custom modules because of that flexibility. You don't really have to stick with what they give you. You can actually do something on your own, or you can even ask other people. For instance, if you were to hire a developer or like a company or a firm to create a custom module that fits the purpose of your own needs, you can easily make that request. Very easily too, because JavaScript, and this it's not coming from me. As I've known, JavaScript is probably one of the most flexible and widely used language. Maybe not back in '96, but now it is. So it's really efficient that way, where you don't have to really, as a business standpoint, hire like an Objective-C developer and again an Android developer, where you just have to work with one developer who can
So
actually.
is this similar to Cordova, like this?
Cordova, PhoneGap are kind of different because they're
Middleware.
they're like a middleware, but at the same time, what they give you at the end of the day isn't a native app.
Yeah.
It looks like a native app because they have constructed their interface very similar to a native app feel, but the performance, it's by far not even close to Titanium because Titanium constructs and builds, compiles JavaScript code and spits out a native APK, which is the Android app, or IPA, an iOS app, where with PhoneGap and Cordova, they do spit out a native app container inside a web view. So you're actually given a web app packaged into a native app. So you do your math with the performance.
Okay.
All right, without further ado, let's do some code. Now, as I've shared before, MVC framework has 3 different elements. The first is the model, and I use model as the first because I think it's a very easy way to approach an MVC model. When you program using MVC models, I think it's easier to create like a story. And to me, a model is like the storyline because it's actually the business logic behind your entire app. So the example app here is a very simple app where, like the example that I shared before, I'm just going to create an app that has one window with a photograph, and when you click on it, you're going to get an alert. And to start off, this is how I define my model within the app. Now, the XML file represents the model of an MVC framework within Titanium. Has different namespaces, and all the documentation is publicly open within their site, docs.appslider.com, and it's actually part of this slide. So the first thing we do is we define the first alloy, which is the start, and we actually we create the window class, which is the foundation of this app, and we give it a class name, container. Inside this window, we're going to have 2 elements. We're going to have a label to input the text, and underneath it, we're going to have an image view to actually insert a photograph file. And we close each tags, and that's the simple model behind this app. Second, we move on to the view. The view, how it's constructed is very similar, almost exact similar. Same equivalent to a CSS file in terms of the website or web app. The container is the class name, so we have a dot in front of it, and we assign an attribute to it. So just to go back, the name of the window class is container because I named it that way. So if I want to add an attribute to that window, I use the property name and value. So the property here I'm assigning is the background color, which is the window's background color, and give it the value white. The second is the names of the namespaces of each of the elements, the label and the image view. To go back, I have 2 different elements inside the window. The place where I put the text using the label namespace, second, image view for the photograph. So with the view, I give the property names and the attribute values for each of them. And last, the JavaScript file is where we define all the methods. This is where we assign and define all the behaviors, which we call events for this app. Now there's only one event that I created here. And to go back again, the event is linked to the image view element here. At the end, you see on click, I gave it a name of the method that I'm calling. Now this structure looks very similar to creating a very average, simple web application. And the JavaScript is pure JavaScript. Another merits of using Titanium is it supports backbone and also underscore. So you can actually call and use their namespace directly within the JavaScript file, other than the pure JavaScript constructors. So the first method function is doClick because I signed it that way within my model. And when this function is called, I am running the alert method and then showing welcome to plus the text value inside the label element. So that will show me this text value inside the label element by calling alert method and using